Hi everyone, welcome to this class. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how I made and decorated this party hat cake for 2021. For this project, I'm going to use a silver edible fabric. You can find these on the Sugar Art website. They are a bit different from sugar sheets. In terms of thickness and flexibility, fabrics are more flexible and thinner. To start, I downloaded and printed a party hat template I found on Google. I'm placing the template on the fabric just to make sure that it fits the fabric. I do this to make sure that one fabric will cover my whole cake. You can absolutely use a smaller template or even a bigger one. If you use a bigger template, you're going to need two fabrics. I then take the template and connect the edges to form a cone. I do this to make sure that the bottom layer of my cake fits the base of the cone. This will also allow you to see what your cake will look like. I have a mini cake layer. This is about 4 inches. And I'm just going to place my cake layer on the bottom of the cone to mark how much I should cut from the template. And now I'm going to start layering my cake. I'm using simple syrup to keep the layers moist and some vanilla buttercream in between layers. A little advice for when making carved cakes: do not use fillings that are sauces or things that do not set. Simply use buttercream or flavored buttercream. I'm using 4 layers. You can use 3, this really depends on how you want your party hat to look. And after you are done filling your cake, make sure to place it in the freezer for about 10 minutes. Now that the cake has sat in the freezer for a few minutes, we can start the carving process. Make sure you start from the top without touching the bottom layer. I cut the same template as the green one on parchment paper. I did this to make sure that the cake and the template fit. The top of our hat will not be made of cake because it's a bit complicated to carve a cake with a pointy top. Note that this step is totally optional, but it's a great way to know that you're on the right track. And now we are ready to add a crumb coat. I am using vanilla buttercream, and this is of course at room temperature. So I inserted a skewer inside the cake to give it more stability so it is easier to frost. You're going to add the crumb coat on this cake like any other cake. Smooth out the buttercream with your spatula, then use your cake scraper to make it smooth, fill out any gaps, and use your cake scraper again until you are satisfied with the outcome. When we are done crumb coating our cake, we're just gonna place it in the fridge, and meanwhile we're gonna prepare the pointy top of our hat. For that, I'm gonna use a piece of fondant. You can absolutely use a piece of Rice Krispie. Otherwise, if you use a piece of fondant, make sure you knead it well in order to start shaping it. And I'm gonna try to shape the piece like a cone as much as I can. I removed the skewer that I previously inserted in my cake, and I'm gonna measure the length of the cake in order to know where to cut my skewer. And next I'm gonna insert the skewer in the piece of fondant or Rice Krispie, it depends what you decided to use, and I'm gonna place it in the cake to secure it. I'm gonna use more buttercream to fill in the gap created between the piece of fondant and the cake itself. If you have decided to use a piece of Rice Krispie, make sure that you add buttercream to the whole piece, because as you know, the piece of Rice Krispie is not as smooth as the piece of fondant. I'm gonna proceed by adding the final layer of buttercream and smooth it out as well. Finally, we're gonna add some more buttercream to the top and try to create a pointy tip. For this step, it's easier to use your spatula before using your cake scraper. When we're finally done frosting our cake, we're gonna place it in the fridge for at least 15 minutes. We're gonna allow the buttercream to set so we can proceed with the decoration. After the buttercream is set, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap the template around my cake. I do this just to make sure that I have the right measurements before I go ahead and cut my fabric. You're not really gonna worry about the top or the bottom because we're going to add some decorations and you're not gonna see any of the gaps. Before applying the sheet on my cake, I'm gonna brush my cake with vegetable shortening. This is the brand I use. You can use any brand you want, of course, and I'm using a 1-inch brush. Now this is one of the main reasons why we need our cake to be cold. If you brush your cake with vegetable shortening and the buttercream is not set, the brush is going to ruin your buttercream. Now that we made sure that our template's measurements are correct, we are ready to cut our sheet. Simply place your template on the sheet, press it down with your hand, and drag your Exacto knife on the fabric and it will cut it right through. Using my Exacto knife as well, I'm going to cut the little border that you see here on camera. Gently place the fabric on the cake and smooth it out with your hand. We do so to avoid the formation of air bubbles between the cake and the sheet. A quick tip to avoid the formation of air bubbles between your buttercream layers and the fabric itself is to never place your cake in the freezer to set. So always place it in the refrigerator and give it time to set. I have a leftover piece of a gold metallic fabric. This is the same fabric as the silver one but in gold, and I wrote some numbers on a piece of parchment paper. Now what I'm gonna do is place my parchment paper on the fabric and I'm gonna use my Exacto knife and trace these numbers. Now the Exacto knife will cut through both of the papers, and this way it's easier than using a pair of scissors. I'm brushing my numbers with some vegetable shortening and I'm gonna sprinkle them with some gold sugar. I made this gold sugar by combining granulated sugar and some gold luster dust. To stick the numbers on the cake, you're simply going to flip the number over and apply some corn syrup. Now that we have covered our cake, we're going to proceed by making the ruffles. I'm using a black edible fabric. So, to make the ruffles, I'm going to measure 2 centimeters on each side. to create the ruffles, we're gonna cut some stripes using the Exacto knife and the ruler. The ruler is gonna allow us to keep the large stripe in place, so it is easier for us to cut the small ones. It's important to note that you're not gonna cut all the way through. You're gonna leave about 2 millimeters on the top. And when you're done with this step, you're gonna have these really nice ruffles, and now they are ready to be placed on the cake. You don't need to add any vegetable shortening on the ruffles because we've already added that on the cake. And you're simply gonna place them starting with the bottom layer. Now, as you can see, I'm creating some small gaps, and this is only to add extra texture. It is optional, so you can do that, or you can simply just place the stripe as it is. When we are done placing our first stripe, as you can see, we have a small gap in the back, and we're going to use this second stripe that we cut. And when you are done with that, simply remove any excess using your scissors. Now, for the top ruffle, I used the same technique to cut a third stripe. This stripe is thinner than the one we've placed on the bottom. The bottom one was 2 centimeters and this one is about 1.5 centimeters. Now, as you can see, I flipped the fabric over and added vegetable shortening. The reason I do that is because this stripe is gonna go directly on the fabric itself, and we did not add any vegetable shortening on the fabric, we added that on the cake. Also, you notice that I am not adding texture. You're gonna add this stripe as it is, because if you add texture, you're gonna have some gaps and it's not gonna look good. When you're done adding the top stripe, you're gonna notice a small gap as well. Now, in order not to cut a fourth stripe, we're gonna use the excess that we cut from the bottom one, and we're gonna remove about 0.5 centimeter so that it matches the thickness of the top one. And we're gonna proceed using the same method. Add some vegetable shortening and simply place it on the cake. And now that we are done adding our ruffles, we're going to create the gold dots on the fabric. Now, in order to do the gold paint, I add gold luster dust and a few drops of vodka. If you do not wish to use any alcohol, feel free to use lemon extract. I'm using this fondant ball tool and I'm going to dip this in the paint and add the dots. Now, the consistency you're looking for is a bit thick. It's like a paste, so make sure you add the alcohol a drop at a time. Now, a good option would be to order a customized edible fabric, maybe with some dots or any other design you wish to have. And finally, for the pom-pom that I placed on the top of the hat, I used the same black fabric that I used for the stripes. I'm using the same method I used to make the ruffles, but here I'm cutting a 4 centimeter stripe. gonna flip my stripe over and brush it with some vegetable shortening. I do this because we're gonna proceed by rolling the stripe so we create a pom-pom. Now when it comes to fabric, a better option than vegetable shortening when using fabric on fabric would be corn syrup because it's more sticky. I inserted a toothpick on the top. This was inserted in the fondant, and we're gonna add our pom-pom, and we are done with decorating our party hat. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out on my Instagram or send me an email. I will leave my Instagram account and my email at the end of this video.